Hey everybody, hope you guys are doing good this morning. And I got a really interesting video for y'all today. I think you guys might like sort of a study into bass fishing, a little bit study into the history, and maybe something that'll help you out to catch a few more fish down the road. But hey, before we get into it, just a couple little housekeeping tips. I just want to remind everybody again, Johnny and I have been working really hard on these new Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns, where we're breaking down lakes all over the country with 40 GPS areas. If you guys are interested in those, just go to fishthemoment.com and you can see our full catalog of lake map breakdowns. And you can also order a personal map breakdown, and we build it for you, customize it for your own specific lake. Doesn't matter how big the lake is, we'll still make one. And also check out the new Fish the Moment live YouTube channel, where we're doing our live podcasts, and we're doing daily clips from those live podcasts on Fish the Moment Live YouTube. So anyway, check that stuff out. Appreciate it. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about the bait that I have seen more 9-pounders caught on in person than any other lure that I've ever been fishing with. And it's going to surprise you, because a lot of people probably don't even know what it is, because it just doesn't get fished anymore. It's old school as it gets. And that's the old Heddon Hellbender. And here it is, the old Heddon Hellbender. And I'm going to show you, and I'm going to tell you some really neat stories and stuff about it. But in order to get where we need to be, and I'll explain to you how I saw these big ones caught on it, I got to tell you how it all started. Back when I was a little kid, probably 5 or 6, 7 years old, my dad and his best friend, who was named Jack Thompson, this was back in like the 1968, 1969, up until like the early 70s, 70, 71, 72. There was about a 5-year span there where Dad and Jack, they spent a lot of time bass fishing Grand Lake and Table Rock Lake. And it was a really neat experience, because that Dad and Jack are the ones that really got me interested in fishing. And what they would do is, like, this is old school. This is back when, Dad, they had a 16-foot Starcraft V-bottom. It had an 18 horsepower Evinrude, and it had one of those silver trolling motors that was on the back of the boat. Probably only had about 20 pounds of thrust. No electronics, no depth finders at all. And that was like not state of the art, but that was like about as good as it got for bass boats back then. And anyway, these trips that they'd plan out, they'd get together the night before, and Jack would come over to our house, and they'd sit out in the backyard, and they'd break out their tackle boxes. And back then, they had those, they don't even make them anymore, but they had these big suitcase type tackle boxes that lifted on both sides, and they opened up like this, and there was trays of like 5 or 6 trays of lures on both sides. And this things they were huge. They were like a suitcase. And that was the tackle boxes they had back then. And I remember the compartments of the lure trays in those big tackle boxes of Jack's were filled with Hellbenders, all the old school stuff back then. Hellbenders, bombers, Heddon Sonics, and like flip tail plastic worms, cream plastic worms. That was about all you had to fish with back then. And they were throwing these Hellbenders. They'd use like a 6.5-foot fiberglass spinning rod. And I remember they had Mitchell 300 spinning reels, and they had blue monofilament line on there. Probably, I'm going to guess, 10 or 12 pound test. But that sticks out in my mind. And it was like a magic when they'd open this tackle boxes open, and they'd start talking about the trip they were going to take the next day. Just the whole vibe of this, I just ate it up, and it really stuck with me. But anyway, they let me go with them. So here again, I'm 6, 7 years old. I'm in the boat with them and everything, and I just so excited I can't even sleep at night. You're getting ready to go those trips. And I remember they'd mainly fish in the spring. Now this is back, you got to remember, before anybody knew stuff about bass fishing. So they would fish in the springtime of the year, because back then, you got to remember, that's when people thought bass bit. They were on the bank and they were catchable. So they'd start fishing like in March and April and sometimes May, and that they wouldn't fish any in the summer or in the winter, because people just didn't think you could catch bass back then. This is way back. This is old school. So most of our fishing was in March and April. A lot of March fishing more than anything else. And I remember we'd go down there, And Dad and Jack, that's all they'd have on is this. This is the only one. I don't have it. He had so many in that box. I wish I could have found them and kept them, but for some way they got lost over the years, and I don't know where they were. But I went out and bought this one yesterday because this is exactly like the ones that they used to fish, except back then they were white and they had like black stripes on them. But this is the bait. So I remember probably at least a half a dozen trips that we went. Every single time that we went fishing, they caught, you know, a bass between 7 and over 9 pounds. And I personally witnessed, I'm going to guess probably a half a dozen 9-pound bass caught on the Hellbender with a spinning rod on Grand Lake and Table Rock Lake. I can remember the exact cuts, the exact coves. I remember 2 9-pound plus fish that they caught on the Elk River arm of Grand Lake, one on a bluff and one on a cut. In fact, I've got a picture of it at my dad's house. I'm holding it up. And then also remember 2 or 3 9-pound class fish they caught at Table Rock Lake in the Campbell's Point area on this particular thing. So you can imagine back then how awesome the fishing was to catch in, you know, in Table Rock Lake with 10 foot of visibility to catch a 9-pounder on this bait here. But I witnessed it. I mean, this was like the magic lure. They had like dozens of these things, and it was the deal. And it's so simple. It's just, it looks, you know, it's just a very tadpole looking thing. It's got a spinner on the back, you know, 2 cheap hooks on it and a metal bill. And the only thing that I can figure why this thing was so productive for big fish is, number one, it's a big bait. It's like 5 inches long. But back then, you got to remember, no, there wasn't such a thing as a crankbait. This is way back. Crankbaits didn't exist until like later in the 70s when they came out with like the Big O's and that type of stuff. So basically, this was the original crankbait. You know, this thing dives about like that. I can't even remember how hard the thing wiggles. I'm going to fish it and to remember just to see, but it probably wiggles sort of like a wiggle wart. But it's just that, you know, it just goes down, probably dives down 8 or 10 feet, I'm going to guess, on 8-pound test line. And it was basically just the first crankbait that they ever came out with. Back then, colors, they didn't understand colors. I mean, they didn't have crawfish patterns or shad patterns. It was just white with black stripes on it. That's the only colors that I can remember that they even fished with the thing. But then you can see it, like I said, I've got so many old memories about this thing, man. Just seeing this thing, I've seen so many giant bass with this thing in its mouth. I'm gonna start fishing it again. I'm gonna give it a try and see if it works, you know, 60 or 50 some years later, 50 some years later, I guess. I'm gonna see if it works. But anyway, this is it, guys. This is the bait that I have seen more 9-pound bass caught in my lifetime than any other ones. I mean, I've caught, you know, not a lot, but I've probably caught, I'm gonna guess, probably seven or 9 bass over 9 pounds in my life, and none of them have been on the same bait. They've all been on different baits, but I have personally witnessed, like I said, you know, 8, 9-pound class bass caught on this Hellbender right here, which was just unbelievable. But anyway, that's today's tip, sort of a blast from the past, looking back in memory lane. And I've got some more stories that I'll share with you guys about that, because everybody has sort of something that motivates them, sort of gets their fishing fever kicked off at an early age. And I'd like to hear some of your guys' stories. Share them with me, drop them in the comments, and I'll share with you guys some that I remember too, because they're really fond memories, and they're the things that really got us started and got us where we are today. So anyway, man, give it a try. Go out and pick you up a Hellbender and give it a try. You know, there's no reason if a 9-pounder would hit it 50 years ago, why wouldn't a 9-pounder hit it today? I'm gonna give it a try and find out. So anyway, that's today's little show. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll check back later. See you.